Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of Fake Accents Unite. A couple of extra guests on this evening, but of course I have to introduce first the Britisher. Good evening, sir. And are we to understand that your delay for joining the stream was due to extreme boomerism? As people may have noted as well, we also have Zarathustra. Good evening. And we also have Staff Sergeant Sniper. Good evening, sir. So it's been an interesting week. I think mainly for reasons other than Brexit, because pond. Oh dear. For goodness sake. Hello.
As a kind of complete fantasist. And it's being asked, why did the police ever fall for this? Why was this investigation ever botched to this extent? But what we've now got is all these rather powerful, rather wealthy men, all with Sir or Lord before their name, effectively demanding heads to roll. And we've got Cressida Dick, who is the head of the unfortunately named head of the Metropolitan Police Service, expressing how sorry she is for this having gone so wrong and whatever. So I'm not sure whether she's officially issued an apology or whether it just sounds like one, if you know what I mean. And you just think, who else in this country gets an apology if they're investigated for something which they then eventually never charged with? Do you understand what I mean?
I know what you're saying.
The rich and powerful effectively get an apology from the police force for being investigated, not for being charged, not for being dragged through the court process. It wasn't as if they were innocently charged with something and ended up being prosecuted. No, they were investigated.
Oh.
And, now we're getting all this bowing and scraping. So I just thought I would give you another, because I think this was called Operation Midland, this particular investigation by the police. I'll give you just in order to give you a contrast. Some 15, 20 years ago or so, there was something called Operation Ore. And Operation Ore was an investigation, again, in paedophilia land, whereby the FBI had cracked some website in which they knew that there was some activity, some such activity on that website. Not all of it was, but some of it was. And therefore, they then started investigating people in the US, but any other people that they knew lived in France or Britain or Germany or whatever, they handed on to the local authorities. With the proviso, you need to investigate these people. They never did. They just basically bulldozed in and started charging them all. Something like 2,000 people, of which 39 committed suicide. The guy who actually led the investigation was promoted.
Who is this? Who is being now bowed and scraped to?
Well, as I say, these are the people who were investigated for being possibly, a part of a paedophile ring in the 1980s.
Oh, that
Remember,
was
it
right.
to
And the chap
all
who
of-
reported them ended up being fraudulent.
Yes, and this is what I find so remarkable. So here we have got somewhere between half a dozen to a dozen very rich, powerful people who are part of the upper echelons of the establishment, and one is bowing and scraping and apologizing to them simply for investigating them. Whereas if you then compare that to another operation that went horribly wrong, where 39 people killed themselves. But that just involved complete and utter Joe Blogs. There wasn't any high profile rich politicians there. No public apology, no inquiry, no nothing. And therefore,
can we say two-tier justice system?
Seeing this happen, you sort of think, hang on a moment, we all know that the rich have got greater access to lawyers and therefore have got more recourse to justice in the courts and things like that. But this is so blatant, whereby you've got the head of the Metropolitan Police Force apologizing to these people, or effectively apologizing to these people. Whereas when it's just, when it's just sort of bog standard folk, then, even if you've been dragged through the whole court process, you don't end up with an apology. It's just basically, oh, well, you haven't been found guilty. Count yourself lucky. Get on with life. And therefore this kind of rubs me up the wrong way.
Yeah, it's definitely the most blatant two-tier justice system I've ever heard of.
Okay, so what point did I go silent for you guys? And I have some fun for you.
Right at the beginning, you basically started
Oh,
out
for-
and you
words
just
in.
disappeared. So
Oh,
therefore
for
I went
goodness
on
sake.
my rant in
I'm
order
not sure
to kind of
anyone
just
even heard
Well,
half of your rant.
cover
No,
the blank.
what's worse is you were silent to the to the actual chat because of one of the sound settings that was on OBS. So no one heard the beginning of yours
so no one
either.
heard anything.
No,
Okay,
no.
that's fine.
So I'm
Okay,
being instructed.
I tried.
Well,
That's all I can
let us just clear things off. Let us make it a blank slate once again, full tabula rasa here, and
Marxist.
but oh god no,
Marxist scam.
that was proposed by John Locke. So there you go.
It was Wittgenstein.
Well, all I know is that the most popular figure
know
I'm
nothing?
aware of. I know nothing, but the most popular figure who popularised tabula rasa was John Locke. But anyway, so I'm gonna start again. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Fake Accents Unite. We are joined by the Britisher, by Sarah, by Staff Sergeant Sniper. This evening, with much ado about nothing, as usual. I swear to God, if my audio cuts out now and you can't hear me in a second. I've been saying that there's basically not much going on this week when it comes to the Brexit process. Just seems to be continually frustrated. Everything that I can see is just general calls from Boris Johnson to thrash out Brexit objections because the EU is not offering him hard and fast issues with his backstop optional agreement, and at the same time you've got Macron saying a decision must be made, which is
decision must be made.
another great way of saying nothing, and not much. However, over the course of this week, a few other interesting things have been happening. One of the things that has come across my my desk, as it were, which is from across the pond, but and is actually a couple of years old, but was updated recently, is that a high school teacher in Oklahoma, for this will probably be one for our American guest, is being accused of racism. If I just use the powers that be to pop up.
So he's being accused of racism. Let me guess. He only uses the white buttons on his television remote control.
No. He said a girl in his class recorded this teacher saying, "To be white is to be racist." Period. So it comes from exactly what I was thinking. The offended student comes from Norman North High School, where she was watching a YouTube clip as part of a discussion on social privilege. The video shown in class was in regards to imperialism, with a whiteout effect being used to illustrate European influence and how it spread across the world. The teacher followed up the end of the video with the following statement: "Am I a racist?" And I say, yeah, I don't want to be. It's not like I choose to be racist, but I do. But I do things because of the way I was raised. The teacher is recorded as saying, "To be white is to be racist." Period. And he, the student who recorded this, felt like half of her family was Hispanic. So how dare he call her racist for a start? Because he's got no proof. But it was also, again, just pointing out the regressive nature of it. So I felt like he was encouraging people to kind of pick on people for being white. Start telling someone something.
Just kind of a.
Just kind of, Start telling someone something.
Hang on, was the teacher a person of colour?
I don't think so. I think it was white because he's saying.
The teacher was a white guy.
He's saying, "I'm
Shock
white.
me.
I'm white and I'm a racist and I don't want to be, but it's just the way I was raised."
My God, it's like Alcoholics Anonymous.
Oh God!
It's,
Hello, I'm a Caucasian and I'm a racist.
Well, if there's nothing I can do about it, it may as well just crack on, right?
It's
Yes.
sounding more and more like original sin, doesn't it?
As part of your,
Yes,
as part of
that's where I
your,
was getting ready to go.
as part of the 12-step program, you must commit yourself to a higher power. That being
Man.
Diane Abbott in this country, Barack Obama's legacy in America,
No.
and
I'm just thinking, wasn't it the crucifixion of Christ that is supposed to have sort of washed mankind free of sin, including original sin?
yes.
When is mankind going to sort of crucify Greta Thunberg in order to make up this latest new original sin?
You do it twice just to make sure.
Oof.
Well, this seems
I gotta
to be
say,
a new original sin that we've acquired since, so we obviously need a new sacrificial offering, don't we?
well, that is the thing that people have been pointing out about intersectionality. Ever since it's gotten to this level, is that it is a religion without a redemption narrative. But I gotta say, I did live in Oklahoma. Is this Moore or Norman?
This is Norman.
Norman. Okay, so it's OU is where it is. I did live in Oklahoma for a decade, and I gotta say, I'm loving the fact that intersectionality is not going to fly in Oklahoma, and this is pretty much play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
I like the fact that universities in Oklahoma seem to have a sort of a historical theme, as in either the Moorish or the Normannic university.
No, it's
Sorry, it's a compulsion. What can I say?
It's two different suburbs. It's two different suburbs. Norman's where Oklahoma University is, and Moore is the town right next to it. That's why I got confused.
I see. So the school itself did issue a statement saying that racism is an important topic that we discuss in schools. While discussing a variety of philosophical perspectives on culture, race, and ethics, a teacher was attempting to convey to students in an elective philosophy course a perspective that had been shared at a university lecture he had attended. We regret that the discussion was poorly handled, and we are committed to ensuring inclusiveness in our schools. Which is obviously that.
Yes, I like it how the discussion was poorly handled. How can you handle that discussion well?
By obviously having by following in the footsteps of, what was the name of that school in America, or was it Berkeley, where it's like the day of visibility?
Oh, Evergreen.
Oh, Evergreen, yeah, where they told the white people to go home.
The day of absence. Yeah.
The day of absence. Go home. Well, they did a day of visibility, didn't they?
Yeah, but it turned into a really sort of feral environment after that, didn't it? They tried to kidnap one of the teachers and locked them in, and
yeah, because he refused
They didn't want to allow the police through.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes, the
I
police were called, and then they arrived and realised they weren't permitted through.
Well, actually, yeah, there was that, and then there was the fact that they were stood down later. And when they had the big student mob meeting, they would not allow the police chief to attend unless she agreed to not come in uniform. They also demanded unarmed, and she gave them the finger and said that that's not happening.
Did they specify a particular clown costume that the police chief would have to wear, or was it just any one of her choice?
She came in civilian clothes. She did refuse to come unarmed, though.
I wonder why that was.
Good point.
So a couple of super chats come in. Sitzgoen says 2,537 seconds late, as he's prone to do so. Dirt is King says, Britisher, what's your opinion on Sir Oswald Mosley?
My opinion on Sir Oswald Mosley. I don't. I'm not one of these people who regard him as one of history's great misunderstood minds.
Can I just give
yeah.
an answer, British's answer before he even says it? I think that he's going to neglect pointing out that P.G. Wodehouse was a particular fan of Oswald Mosley, as we recently discussed. I'm pretty sure that British's opinion has been informed by that. Roderick Spode?
That's entirely that. Yes, it's Roderick Spode. But what is it? It is the right, nay, the duty of every free-born Englishman to grow his own potatoes. Followed by a roar from the crowd.
That.
Yes.
Oh god, I need to go back and rewatch Jeeves and Wooster. It was so worth every second.
It was good. You enjoyed it, didn't you?
I watched like an episode a day
sure if you would.
until it finished. Yeah,
that's amazing.
Architect of Fate says a 20-year-old Britisher gave up the rib to create women, but voting and governance were part of the deal. Was it worth it?
You made a horrible mistake, sir. Go back in time and take it back.
Yeah, it was a genetically flawed rib. What can I say?
What's your opinion on that, Sarah? Are you genetically flawed and should be struck from the...
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
When you're so based, you wish for your own extinction. It's just like...
Unbase me now, as Lady Macbeth says.
Well, it's a sex that has within its own lineup Germaine Greer, Harriet Harman, and of course the intellectual titan that is Diane Abbott. What can we say?
There are not enough.
Don't forget Andrea Dworkin.
Well, of course, Andrea Dworkin, the greatest of them all.
There are.
All of us are all right, though, aren't we, Britisher?
Sorry,
we're all right, aren't we?
Some very few.
People.
How should we say one needs to be very select?
Let us not forget that British's favourite fancy happens to be Anne Widdecombe.
Oh dear God!
I will take this opportunity to make the plug of my wife is awesome and amazing and allows me to come on these things by dealing with the kids. So she's a good woman.
Is she in the background?
She's also very angry at you, Mark, for not giving her more warning.
Has she got a?
Is she in the room with you by any chance?
Somehow in my mind's eye, I can see your wife cleaning the household guns in the corner of the room.
Yeah. The Walther PPK has come out of the cupboard.
Actually, you've never seen her gun. I might have to arrange a picture of that for you.
Oh, please do. Awesome. How about Mary Whitehouse, Britisher, your favourite?
Oh yeah, Chap pointed that out.
Just making it worse now, aren't you?
Well, who's that fat model he likes? Tess, what's her face?
Oh, Tess Holiday.
Oh.
I don't know. Oh God. That's just horrendous. Britisher is a fine proponent of fat pride.
One of those feeders.
Oh yeah, you think he's one of these people who is an enabler? You know, anyone in his care, he just continues to feed.
For kicks.
I think I would more likely be the one with a cattle prod going, "Exercise, woman, exercise."
I could do with one of
I will.
these.
I will say the next super chat is going to make you feel better about yourself.
I think, Sarah, that there are many men in the chat who would give their left and right arms, in fact, to be able to whip you into shape.
Excuse me, I think he said cattle prod.
Oh yes, cattle prod. Sorry, my
I thought
mistake.
you were going. I thought you were going elsewhere there when you said
Me
left
too,
and right. When you said,
Yes, I
they would give
deliberately.
their left and right. I thought, well, what's
Oh.
about to
Yes,
come here?
I deliberately
And
subverted
right
your
now.
expectations. There you go.
When are these leggings coming out then, Mark?
Tomorrow, hopefully.
Are they? Are they
Yeah,
really?
yeah.
Sorry,
Tomorrow,
what's this? Leggings.
tomorrow is
I'm gonna get some Britisher leggings.
tomorrow
I
is.
feel a Greg's theme coming on here.
I'm being continually needled due to the lack of variety on the Fake Accents Unite merch store. Link in the description. No shameless
Mark,
plugging.
Mark's
So,
very soft.
yes, Sarah bought a t-shirt. Give us.
I'm gonna buy another one. It's very soft, very snug.
So there we go. Get your Fake Accents Unite merch down there. But Architect of Fate wants to stroke your ego a little bit more now, Britisher. So he says, has divine justice struck the speaker's voice, or was it the Britishers' plague?
It's the Britishers' plague. I breathed onto a bit of cotton wool and put it into a little vial and sent it down to Westminster, addressed to him, and thereafter it took off from there.
And it only
Well
took.
done, sir. Can now you do about 350 more?
And it only took.
Well, yes, but I would have to watch out not to send one to Peter Bone, because I don't know. I don't know if any of you have seen The Week That Was this time round. There was a
Oh no, I never watched
fantastic
that.
exchange between Peter Bone and the speaker, because of course the speaker was struggling very badly with his voice, and therefore Peter Bone stood up and, with the most innocent look on his face possible, suggested that, well, he has to do a lot of shouting and he needs to use his voice, and this does seem to be an awful strain on him. And so, so everything was just pure concern. And therefore, perhaps when it comes to the more arduous debates, for example, those centered around Brexit, it might be a good idea for him to stand aside and let someone else. To which I believe the speaker replied something along the lines of "Dream on,"
Oh yeah, dream on. That's
and then
right.
sat back down again. Yes.
Amazing. No, I was going to say, to watch The Week That Was. No, I would never do that. Nonsense. I might listen to it from time to time, but I just like denying, I just like the idea that that if I ever consume your content, all those hours ceaselessly editing the images and the clips together was worthless. Because
Yep. There's only one thing I can really say to that, isn't there?
Oh god, right.
Oh, I'm sorry. You two are too young to realize that he's talking about hanging up on you.
I know he's talking about hanging up on the phone. I'm not that old. I'm not that young, sorry.
I knew, but I was sort of indifferent to it.
Just a kind of strange ambivalence
I think in your case it's not indifference, isn't it? It's aloofness.
I like that, yes. It's all part of the mystique.
That's kind of, she sits on her golden throne above and dismisses you, British. So another smaller story that came across my desk, shall we say, is a story I've been following this for some years actually, but it's only just come to its conclusion. So for some context, there's a chap called Dr. David Makareth, rather devout Christian fellow who worked as a emergency doctor for the NHS. He's been there for 26 years. And he was changing position to become a disability. What do they call it? Where they screen people to see whether or not they're eligible for disabled status, basically. And so he was moving basically to work in the Department of Work and Pensions and that sort of thing, because that's where the disability assessors work. And basically, he was fired from his job and he says he was fired from his job because he refused to call a biological man a woman. Basically, he was interrogated, in his own words, about his personal religious convictions. He told the court in July his line manager had asked him specifically that if you have a man who's 6 foot tall, has a beard, who says he wants to be addressed as she and Mrs., would you do that? And Makareth said because of his religious beliefs, he could not, and he was subsequently let go.
Really?
I think his failing has been to base his case on the religiosity of his convictions, but this has led to a rather interesting sort of side note that came of it. So CBN reported that his attorney told the court his belief is in the truth of the Bible, in particular Genesis 1:27, God creating man in his own image, so on and so forth. It follows that every person is created by God as either male or female. A person cannot change their sex or gender at will, and any attempt or pretense of doing so is pointless, self-destructive, and sinful. So not based on scientific literature, but the religious backing for this one. Makareth himself told the court that the idea of transgenderism is a rebellion against God. And I am, of course, aware that there are men or women who believe they have been trapped in a wrong body. I do not question the sincerity of their convictions. A small number of such people have always existed. But until recently, such a belief was considered by medics to be delusional and a symptom of a medical disorder. It's only recently that it has been reorganized as normalized and such delusional beliefs accepted at face value. What is responsible for that change is political pressure, not scientific evidence. And so on. So basically, the court's ruling stated that a belief in Genesis 1:27, lack of belief in transgenderism, and a conscientious objection to transgenderism are, in our judgment, incompatible with human dignity and conflict with the fundamental rights of others, specifically here transgender individuals. Insofar as those beliefs form part of his wider faith does not satisfy the requirement of being worthy of respect in a democratic society, not compatible with human dignity, and not in conflict. It does not satisfy the requirement of being worthy of respect in a democratic society, not incompatible with human dignity, and not in conflict with the fundamental rights of others. So there's that.
Well, I'm sure there are plenty of Muslims out there that will take the job.
Yeah, you'll notice that there's not.
Okay.
That they refer specifically to Christianity and they don't address any of the other Judeo-Christian faiths.
I think I saw him on TV last year actually giving an interview, and he was a real sweetie as well. He was a very gentle man. He wasn't. Could tell he was a very personable guy.
Well, you have to be
and he also felt very sympathetic to these people. But for him. And he was good at his job. I mean, he'd been in the NHS for a long time as well.
Yeah, as you say, over 26 years, and then just let go.
Bless him.
Well,
I think he's working in the NHS again now, isn't he?
This is the latest update. I do not have anything from here onwards. Just like that.
Well, from over here, all I can say is thank God for the First Amendment, because this is literally the Colorado Baker case when there's no First Amendment to back you up.
It was also an entirely hypothetical situation, aside from anything else. As I say, I think that him choosing to base things off a religious conviction as opposed to the fact that it is one of the most contentious scientific issues of the current decade basically is what sunk his case. But I just find the idea that calling the wider, his wider faith is incompatible with human dignity.
I know.
It's just is wildly inaccurate for one.
Do you enjoy his righteous Christian indignation, though? You don't get enough of that these days.
Well, can I ask a question first?
Of course,
I did. Dare I say I did touch upon this, and in a recent video of mine that
I'm so sorry, Britisher.
Was this really a court case, or was this a tribunal?
Yeah, that's right.
Let me have a look. It's a British court, so.
Well, this is just it. I have read in some articles it's a tribunal, and some of them have said it's a court.
Well, I think it's he was
have a
let go by.
feeling this is some kind of employment tribunal.
Well, is it
That's the
possible he
impression
was
I
fired
got
by,
from reading various articles.
well, is it possible that he was fired by a tribunal and what the story is now is his court case suing them?
No. You see, when you have when you get sort of unjustly fired, so that may well be some kind of committee or whatever, you know. But if you get unjustly fired, you can effectively you can kind of sort of go for what do they call it, unfair dismissal or whatever, and that's a tribunal that decides on
So
these
the
things.
Telegraph says that it is an employment tribunal that he's suing the government from, and that's that. Yes.
So what I mean is, it's these things have legal force, but it's perhaps stretching it to call them a court, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
Um, at the same time, I think some of the things around it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think, like everybody here, I'm on the doctor's side. But I think some of the things have been somewhat interpreted always to the worst possible effect in order to generate headlines, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So, to be honest, I'm not sure that it really sort of boils down to quite what some of the headlines say. That said, he should never have been in a position whereby he loses his job for, you know, not wishing to use pronouns. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah. The from what I'm reading here in the Telegraph, as opposed to the Daily Wire, which is the original source, it's talking about he makes the statement that as a doctor, his responsibility is to act in good conscience in the best interest of the patients, not to adopt fancies, prejudices, or delusions to avoid offence at all costs. And I think that's one of the things that it's important to highlight, is that obviously when it comes to transgenderism, the jury is out when it comes to is not out. Sorry, when it comes to the best method for treatment for these people, and indeed the prevalence of the condition itself overall, because a move towards what was being described to him there, which is obviously self-identification with, you know, that's what it was described as, and in what people like my friend Rose of Dawn would say is transtrenderism as opposed to transgenderism. You know, he'd be perfectly justified, I think, in denying that person the use of pronouns when they make no effort to present as the gender in which they're attempting to present. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think as such, everything like this can be solved with common sense, and that is basically don't put people on the spot. So you know that viral clip that went round with that rather butch-looking chap with, you know, blonde hair, insisting everybody call him ma'am in the shop while he's rampaging around angrily.
It's ma'am.
Yes. You know, it's precisely that sort of thing that you know, misunderstandings will happen, and aside from that, if basically it's perfectly okay to just say, well, hello, as opposed to hello, sir, or hello, madam. Do you understand what I mean?
Good afternoon, Britisher.
It can effectively be avoided, and more often than not, this controversy arises because people are being put on the spot. You must now call me this. Whereas you could have that conversation entirely without any reference to it. But no, it must be referred to, and it must be referred to in the way that I wish it to. And that's when you just go, I'm sorry, I'm not playing that game.
Well, and as Mark pointed out earlier, it, you know, what to do about this sort of situation hasn't been locked down. You know, it really isn't settled science yet. I mean, hell, it was Sky News last week, I think, had a story about people trying to detransition because screwed up because it's been, it's starting to be too
I
easy.
I believe that one was 100 cases in Britain.
100 or 200. It was a few hundred.
Yeah, but
How do you reverse something like that, though?
But it's also
very carefully
with difficult. This is something that I've been saying for a number of years, which is that it'll be interesting to see, sort of 10, 15 years down the line from this becoming a much more mainstream surgery, or treatment option, hormone replacement therapy. How many kids sue because they've made their parents do something, or they felt pressured to do something, or it was just the scientific literature states that basically 80% of people who present gender dysphoric symptoms basically either grow out of it. A large proportion of them end up actually being gay, and then there's a very small proportion who actually continue with gender dysphoria. So I just think that this idea of pushing... I mean, there's a school in Brighton, of all places, of course, which where some staggering amount, like nearly 8% of the students identify as non-binary or trans, right? And
I think for American audiences, we need to point out that Brighton is the San Francisco of Britain.
Yeah,
fair enough.
And you think for a condition that affects 3% of 3% of the population, it's not the statistic is being inflated by sort of it being trendy to be something, as opposed to any genuine dysphoric diagnoses. Which is why, again,
you brought up the suing later over, and you realize they're all going to have to sue their parents because that's the only person they're going to have cause of action against.
Yeah, pretty much.
Poor Desmond is amazing. He's gonna cash in on this big time, I think, when he's older.
Oh God, maybe.
Watch this space.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, enough of trans troubles. This is not the channel for that. But today, I believe it's today, things have been kicking off around Britain, indeed around the world. Over 200 arrests have been made as Extinction Rebellion protests in London. So, for those of you who are unaware, Extinction Rebellion are the climate alarmists of the day.
Let's remind everyone, these are the same idiots that can't operate a fire hose.
Oh yes, they attempted to, what was it, cover the Bank of England, I think it was, in...
No, it's the Treasury.
Oh, the Treasury, sorry, yeah, the Treasury, in fake
with
blood.
Like one spurt, and then wore the rest of it.
Yes,
yeah, I heard it had to be... somebody in the comments said it had to be acid washed, which didn't come as a surprise. Some sort of white stone, and particularly certain types of marble and whatever, can be stained.
Yes, quite porous. Yeah.
So I think there is isn't there a court, a sort of a court in the Foreign Office that is kind of, it's Carrara marble or something like that, and therefore even if they have any functions there, they never serve red wine.
Really?
Because they've learned from experience.
Well, he's not wrong. He's not wrong. Even the marble cutting boards you can get, they tell you to be careful about doing meat on them because you will stain them with the meat.
That sounds like something that sort of, the sort of public health warning, should be sort of read by someone with a voice like Vincent Price. Be careful if you cut blood on a marble chopping board.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for taking it there. But yeah, my point was it is very easy to ruin marble.
Has anybody ever seen Theatre of Blood with Vincent Price?
Yes,
it's definitely worth watching, isn't it?
What is this old boomer?
It's definitely over the top.
Yes, it's as ghoulish as you can possibly get. This is a Shakespearean actor who resolves to kill his theatre critics by means of some of the most spectacular murders in Shakespeare plays.
Nice. Is it worth a watch then?
it's definitely worth a watch. It is very black humour, and as I say, it is called Theatre of Blood. What more can you want?
I will draw your
What's
attention.
this image you're showing us here?
Yes, I will draw your attention to the stream chat, where I have posted an image. This is a group of Extinction Rebellion protesters getting a McDonald's. It's just like,
Where should I be looking here? Hang on.
if you look in stream chat,
This is the ultimate boomer who didn't realise he needed to come on Discord in order to actually get on this chat. you
above
remember.
streaming is stream chat.
Ah,
There you
okay.
go. So
Yep.
behold, this group of buxom beauties carrying their flag as they order their Big Mac and fries. Can you see it now, Bridger?
Well, I'm sure they will have gone to McDonald's to get one of the side salads.
Well, regardless, yes, the vegan side salads that McDonald's are famous for.
Well, at least they're queuing nicely.
It's just, what does
the flag say? Oh, is that the Extinction?
it
What does
says
the flag say?
Extinction Rebellion?
Extinction Rebellion. It says something along the lines of "for the something is here" or something.
Future, maybe.
I don't know, but yeah.
Well, there's nothing cliche about that.
It is remarkable, isn't it, when you see some of the interviews in the media with these people, whereby you kind of realise that by their logic, anything is permissible because they're saving the world, and the world is in imminent danger, and it needs to be saved, and therefore it must be brought to anybody's attention, and therefore this is perfectly excusable.
Yes.
And so they can just lock down a bridge in the centre of London. Well, I mean, who cares? I mean, it will only inconvenience a great many people. It cost a lot of cab drivers a lot of money, and possibly put local, business owners, kiosks and whatever, out of money. But I mean, it doesn't matter because they're saving the planet.
And I assume they don't have to. Do they don't have to get a license to do that? They just do it. Is that the point? Organised.
The thing is, if London is home to several football clubs, Arsenal, Tottenham Hotspur, you name it, imagine one of those crowds just decides to close down a bridge in central London. Do you
Yes.
think they are going to be treated in the same way?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, no, the batons would come out.
Do you remember that the fire engine with a diesel generator on it that was used to splash the street in front of the Treasury was an untaxed vehicle?
Okay, I actually had a question.
I am sure you are lying, and that was a solar-powered fire engine.
I'm sure it was, but they're using more vehicles which are also untaxed, un-MOT'd.
Not even taxed it, the cheap bastard.
Well,
I wonder whether it was insured.
No, well, it can't be if it hasn't been MOT'd.
Oh,
Well,
Mark, that's such a nerdling a thing to say. Where's your MOT?
What, like I'm going to go over there and just
Have you
request
given it a good valet before? Well, it's one way to remove them, to be fair, if they get clamped. That'd be such a London thing
Yes,
to
but
happen
you can,
as well.
given its size and weight, you can have a substantial accident with a fire engine.
That
So
is true.
Where did they pick that up
given
from,
that it's
then?
illegal to drive around without any insurance, given how much damage you could do if you were involved in a collision with something that size. I mean,
these people are living dangerously.
If you're in a Mini and you get hit by that, you might as well be hit by a tank.
Yes.
Well, I that's why I was wanting to ask a question on that. I don't know how it works there, but I know here you can buy a temp use permit for if you're going to buy some sort of auction vehicle, like a large truck, cement truck, fire truck, whatever, and you just need to be able to get it home. You can insure it as well by just telling your insurance company, here's the temp use permit, here's the auction I'm going to. Is that possible over there?
No.
Don't think so.
I have no idea.
The closest equivalent we have is you can buy a kind of insurance which gives you your own number plate if you're driving a number of different vehicles for work, for instance, and then you can be insured comprehensively across any vehicle, and you would hang that on the back of the vehicle you were driving. That's the closest we have.
I mean, even
Like
if
on a
that
magnetic
were
thing where you
possible,
can.
that's not what they did. Because
Okay.
it wasn't as if they picked up their fire engine that they got somewhere and then took it home.
No.
They headed into the centre of London.
And then where did they
I-
pick this up from?
Sorry?
It would have been some auction
Where
somewhere.
did they rented it out or something, or they
I presume that
they picked it up?
maybe some of the fire department are funding them, but no.
Do you remember when the Navy eBayed off loads of their old military stuff? Maybe I don't know, maybe they picked it up in something like that.
Well, I wonder if there are sort of privately held fire engines around, a bit like St. John's ambulances, if you know what I mean.
I see, yeah.
You know, that could be used at, for example, big events. If you've got
Something
if you've got some kind of
nefarious
huge
about
rock
that.
concert you've got on, or you know, something like that, or some kind of car race, you know, you might be able to sort of get your fire engine for the day.
Like
That's
one of
the
those
way
sort of,
I could imagine it might work, if you know what I mean.
For that matter, if you were going to do some sort of dirt track thing, you do have to wet the track, so you would need something like that to be able to do it with. They make several different versions, but a fire truck would be an option. You know, a retired fire truck.
Jeremy Corbyn has decided he's going to speak to all the climate change activists and declare a climate emergency, and then claim that him declaring a climate emergency, but then him declaring a climate emergency means that the British government is the first in the history of the world to declare a climate emergency, even though he is not the government.
So much cringe. Just toughen up, man.
You know, already in the last 3 years, the global temperature has risen by 0.5 degrees Celsius because of Brexit.
Oh yeah, of course.
All the hot air.
Grief.
Yes, indeed, Sarah.
That declaration on a piece of paper helps me out when I go to the toilet. That's all I got to say on that. There are who is it? Bill Whitaker wants you to say your magic word, Britisher.
Remind me, what is my magic word?
Romans.
Romans, Bill. Romans.
There we are. Let me see what we've got. So anything else on Extinction Rebellion? Apart from the fact that they arrested 23 protesters at Embankment, which is not too far from where I am, just earlier today.
Is it really?
I'm just glad.
You're right in the thick of it, Mark.
Oh, you know, I could go down.
You should get down there and do some on-street reporting for us.
Maybe on Wednesday. We'll see. Because
you
apparently
can sort of go down, you know, have your sort of hair in dreadlocks and
Tim Pullett.
Perhaps some sort of some kind of beads woven into your beard, and then sort of go down there and sort of sit in a circle and bang bongo drums with them.
Of course, drum circling as we sit covered in fake blood that was supposed to go on the front.
The one way to change the world is always been drum circles, hasn't it? That's been the case sort of ever since the beginning of time. I mean, that's how the French Revolution began. That's what the Americans actually did in Boston Harbor. They weren't there to throw tea in. That's why they dressed up as Indians.
They aggressively drum circled.
Sit in a circle and aggressively drum circle until the British Empire withdrew. Yes,
I'm just saying that.
And we did. It worked, didn't it?
And it worked. So, yes. Ever since.
Yes, I loved the weary. I'm just staying out of this.
So I would like to bring up the irony. Now I think it's ended now, but I would like to bring up the irony that there in Londonistan there is there's the Extinction Rebellion, all the wacky climate activists. Over in Dutch land, there's the farmers dragging out their tractors to shut down the highways to complain about their treatment. The beauty of the polar opposites here.
Yeah, it's actually that's when you mentioned that's in the way you mentioned it, that did highlight something. Given that we know about the population breakdown in London, and given that this is happening in London, aren't all those climate protesters awfully white?
Yes, they're incredibly white, and as we all know, to be white is to be racist. So
Period.
Clearly an issue.
I mean,
You
I
heard it
just
here
think,
first, Guardian.
given where these protests are taking place, and given what the sort of demographical
You
numbers
mean
are
it's like a
down
sort
there.
of microaggression? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no. What I'm asking is, where are the non-white climate protesters?
I mean,
Actually, wait a minute. They did. There was somebody. Was it the Guardian? There was somebody that did an article about Extinction Rebellion does not have
God's sake.
appropriate represent blah 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 blah.
yeah, it
word salad.
doesn't have the
And-
alphabet people involved. Yeah.
Well, you see, they
And-
could always just basically take inspiration from Justin Trudeau.
Trudeau.
Yeah. They could just half of them black up and just.
British.
And even better, like the day after the Greta girl did the UN, somebody did the same thing to her.
Oh, so the scowling, the angry scowling when she walked by.
No, the talking about, why is it a white girl thing?
Oh yes, I saw that. And
The white saviour
someone had a
complex.
problem with her wearing pigtails. They said it was too Aryan.
It's too Aryan to wear pigtails, as someone told Greta Thunberg.
I saw an article on it. Yeah, I'll try and find it, dig it out. And hang on, let me see if I can find it now.
Well, it is very
was something
Nordic,
like,
isn't it? Plats have a very Nordic sort of theme to them.
Indeed.
I tell you what,
But
whilst
my question with the Plats is not so much, ethnic origin, so to speak. It's more that they seem to be being applied in order to make it look as young as possible, which I find somewhat dubious.
Yes, I know what you mean. It is a little bit.
they've got to keep her looking
peculiar, isn't
13.
it?
That's what it is.
Precisely. She looks nothing like a 16-year-old. And you just wonder, well, most of these kids who are, going on school strike, I mean, they're not the 16-year-olds.
No.
It's 12 and 13-year-olds. And therefore one is trying to kind of, how should we say, keep her closer to her sort of
Target
intended
demographic.
audience.
Yeah.
Beautifully put. Yeah.
I tell you what, whilst Sarah hunts out that article, I'm just going to run through the last
Where can I post it, Mark? Where are you?
in
sorry.
stream chat there, and I'll bring it up. But I just want to run through the super chats so we don't get too far behind. So, Architect of Fate says, "Good to see you're no longer named Oozalu's consort." Thanks very much. I did turn up on an Oozalu stream for a brief period of time, and they decided to call me.
Got thoroughly abused.
I did. Then Harry Channel says, "How hard is it to get fake bloodstains out of skinny man jeans?"
Burn them. It'll be easier to deal with.
Yes. I mean, teacher, give a man a fire, he'll be warm for a day. Set a man on fire, he'll be warm for the rest of his life.
Rest of his life.
So, Harry and Gladive donated £5. Thank you very much, sir. And said, "Extinction Rebellion, unironically a bunch of green commies. Just done a video myself summarising their handbook. Standard social justice plus climate cultism, really."
I'll have to check that out.
He raises a good point, so I shall ignore the shameless shill that is in the super chat stuff. No, good.
Well,
good
shameless,
to hear.
but I'm gonna watch it anyway after.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that just means they're coordinating with AOC's former chief of staff guy, Shycat, whatever you pronounce his name.
Sorry, what?
Oh, yes, yeah.
The
Was that
the
her
guy that
hubby
used to be
or her boyfriend?
AOC's chief of staff, no, not her boyfriend, the ex-chief of staff, the one that admitted that the Green New Deal was actually not about the green, it was about socialism.
That's right.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh, what a surprise! And finally, Mighty Balzac donated $2 Aussie. Says, "Speaking of firefighting, Crassus."
Indeed, yes, Crassus. Yes, the firefighter, or should we say the non-firefighter? Yes, the chap who would turn up in Rome with his own entirely slave-populated firefighting force, and would start negotiating with the owners of the houses that were not yet on fire next to the burning one, and would offer them a fraction of the actual value, if you know what I mean. And many people were wondering at the time whether, he might not have been connected with setting the fires in the first place. Yeah, he was.
Sorry,
he was
Bridger, I have
an
to interrupt you.
incredibly rich man, but he wasn't very popular.
Bridger, I have to interrupt you. Dire, warnings coming in of a really important super chat that has just hit my front desk. RC says, "Have some money, unt sense." So there we go. Thank you very much.
It's nice to see the Australians made it today.
Oh dear. Cheers for that. Sorry, you were saying, Bridger?
No, I think I pretty much said it.
What do we call it? Crassus having set the fires himself, is that right?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where one never quite knows. It's the same thing with Nero. Did he actually start the fires, or was he engaged merely in trying to put them out? Given that he seemed to be the main beneficiary of the fires.
I thought he was fiddling whilst Rome was burning.
No, he wasn't fiddling.
Was he fiddling with?
He was more like faffing.
Well, firstly, he couldn't have been fiddling.
It's never been elaborated.
Firstly, let's start at the top. He couldn't have been fiddling because, I mean, violins didn't exist yet. Secondly, the only reason we call it fiddling is because, was it somewhere in the 17th or I think 18th century, the main manufacturer of violins was a German called Fiedel, which is why eventually we started referring to them all as fiedles or fiddles.
I mean, I just assumed it was something...
So in a way, just like vacuums are hoovers, if you know what I mean. It's actually a brand name in that regard.
I just assumed it was a quirk of the Irish, and the Irish were wrong.
So as such, if he played anything, it would have been a lyre.
Yes.
But there doesn't really seem to be too much to say that he ever actually did that. There is a suggestion that he actually did try to organize some help, some resistance against the fire, so to speak. But then again, that might just have been
handed out a bottle of Evian.
Yeah, yes. That might indeed have just been his playing it up for the crowds, if you know what I mean. But what happened after the fire was the fire had sort of cleared a large swathe through the center of Rome. And he decided, what for a wonderful place for a large... of course, only for his Imperial Majesty.
What?
And within that park was then his golden house, so his new palace.
God, based.
So basically, a huge part of Rome has burnt down, and what does he decide? Oh well, let's landscape it, have a few ponds, perhaps some goldfish, and in the middle, my palace. No need to rebuild any housing for. Do you understand what I mean? So
you got planning and permission for that.
Yeah, the Romans look at that and go, hang on a moment. First the whole place mysteriously burns down, and then suddenly you come about the main plot of real estate in the center of Rome with your palace in the middle of it. What a coincidence. So then, of course, he launched a massive PR exercise and started blaming the Christians.
Sick.
Sick.
Well,
you from the street. You from the street.
Classic.
Sick. Bruv, that burning that Rome was sick. Yeah.
Boy.
In it,
yes. I can see the article you just sent me, Sarah, which was...
Hilarious, isn't it?
Oh, Dinesh D'Souza.
Like the way they call him a climate change denier. I didn't realise that was a new phenomenon.
It's been a while since I've seen anything by him, actually.
Yeah, me too.
I thought
just
when
sort of
he was back
passing
on...
phase.
He did a book, didn't he? Or a film based on his book?
Yes. I think he went to prison for it.
Did he?
Misappropriated funds or something. They stitched him up a little bit. But yeah, it was something with Hillary Clinton, wasn't it? I never watched it.
Yeah, he was properly it was like the Ben Shapiro BTFO videos, wrecked feminists,
he did a couple of good ones.
Wrecked students in general was just the general theme.
Owned with facts and logic. To be fair, I think he did okay.
He did all right at times.
This article is bonkers.
Climate change denier Dinesh D'Souza posted a bizarrely offensive tweet on Sunday comparing teen eco-warrior Greta Thunberg to an Aryan poster girl used by the Nazis.
She does look a bit Aryan.
The far-right filmmaker and political commentator shared a photo of Thunberg next to the poster, slamming liberal efforts to stop climate change. Children, notably Nordic white girls with braids and red cheeks, were often used in Nazi propaganda, D'Souza wrote. An old Goebbels technique. Looks like today's progressive left is still learning its game from an earlier left in the 1930s.
Oh God! Like he's flogged that dead horse.
I can hear British's
Stop.
the steam coming from British's ears
What
at
do
the
you think British
idea
is?
that the Nazis
Well, I mean,
were on the left.
I remember when he put out his tweet, and I didn't think much of it at the time. I thought, look, you're straining awfully here. Trying to make them out to be the Nazis is a bit ridiculous. Given I think that he's got a track record of comparing other people to the Nazis.
He also wrote a book which I think I had on Audible for free, and in the first couple of chapters, he denounces what he calls reductio ad Hitlerum. The endless comparison of people to Nazis.
Yeah,
he's all over the
and
place.
he's
this guy.
doing it. Oh, he like this. Oh,
He's
this
all
is a
over the
fun
place.
game with Mike Pence and the Dutch student that's halfway down the page.
I gotta say, looking at that picture when he's right, he's right.
Let me just see if I can find. There we go. What's that? What was the name of Dinesh D'Souza's book? Now it's gonna annoy me.
God, what's it called? Yeah.
See if I can.
The Death of a Nation. There you go.
Oh.
Yeah.
That was the one. He's written quite a few actually.
Yeah, he has, hasn't he? Crikey.
12. I can see.
The Death of a Nation, which is
The birth of
just sort of a slight juxtaposition of the birth of a nation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
26 books he's done. 26.
Can't name one of them, but
They're apparently, it was only the plantation politics and the making of the Democratic Party. That's what it was. So now a major motion picture called "Who is Killing America," or "Death of a Nation." There you go. Right. Not a Scholar donated 50 Danish kroner. Thank you very much. It says 20-year-old Britisher rebelled against the reptile world by causing a mass extinction, thus making the first ... I will leave it to you to the first fence. I don't know. Created a great fence so the dinosaurs could no longer, like the male dinosaurs were on one side, the female dinosaurs on the other. They couldn't procreate, so they were all extinct. Voila.
kiss through the mesh.
They couldn't get a kiss through
Die
the mesh.
Dinosaurier werden immer trauriger, denn die Saurier dürfen nicht an Bord.
What?
That's a bit of a lyric of a rather humorous song that was in the charts on the continent years ago, decades ago, about how the dinosaurs are getting ever more sad because they're not allowed aboard, which is of course Noah's Ark.
I see. Yes.
Pretty sure that's heartbreaking.
I like it's just like Sarah's upset at the fate of the dinosaurs.
So beautiful and poetic, but
Oh god. Speaking of
Meanwhile, I'm trying to find any remaining B-17s, thinking that he's gone German again.
Yes, Britisher does
Well,
occasionally
he does
lapse.
slip into it every now and again.
I believe in knowing your enemy.
There's knowing them,
That
and then
could go
there's
both ways, though. You have to be very careful.
Be
British.
careful not to stare into the void, Britisher, lest the void stare back into you.
Stare into you.
Speaking, though, of somewhat poetic things, so Extinction Rebellion protesters in New York, just jumping back into the climate change debacle, poured fake blood all over New York's capitalist bull. So if you remember, this is the bull which was famous last year because
the little girl in front. Isn't
they
he?
stuck a little girl, and everyone on the feminist camp was proclaiming it, and everyone else was saying that there is no greater testament to the hubris of the feminist movement to stare down certain death without realizing that they stand absolutely no chance of not being trampled to death by it.
Absolutely.
Yes, because that particular posture of standing in front of the bull like that was the immediate scene preceding the little girl being flung 3/4 of the way down Wall Street.
Oh yes, didn't someone do that?
Well,
Yeah.
that's what normal people like us would understand, not the feminists who put the thing there.
Metaphor, Britisher.
Of course, yes.
For
The
imminent
Britisher
death.
the Britisher is a very literal soul. He just doesn't understand any metaphor at all. No comeback, Britisher? I mean, you just
None
accept
whatsoever. I'm just sitting here
quiet.
chuckling.
This caused more than 20 people to be arrested. This after they poured fake blood all over the famous charging bull statue.
Well, what I saw is they had poured some blood on the bull, but mainly they'd poured blood on themselves and then littered the floor around the bull as though they had all been savaged by the bull.
Oh yes, they've also done.
By capitalism.
Because there's definitely no socialist angle to this. Not
It's
to
interesting
mention
that
Oh, that's hilarious.
that all of them took to the bull. None of them took to the bear.
yes, I know.
Is there a bear at Wall Street?
I believe there's also a bear, isn't there?
Oh, if there is, I have not seen it.
I've never heard of that. No.
Bear? Are you thinking of the wolf, Britisher?
Are you going the Wolf of Wall Street?
Perhaps I'm completely misremembering, but I thought there was also a bear.
Well, maybe chat will.
Well, you see,
correct
because
us.
there's a bull market and there's a bear market.
The God's
perhaps.
Yeah, I
Storm?
don't know what
Oh,
you're
no,
saying,
no.
but I don't remember there
The
being
great,
one.
the great bear of Wall Street. American stock trader. Oh, there is a bear. You're right. So forgive me.
It should be. There you go, Britisher. You were correct.
Well, a bull market is a rising market. A bear market is a falling market.
Yes, indeed.
So you've effectively got the two powers of the market, the bear and the bull.
Yes, and it causes me no end of trouble with my Bitcoin investments. Anyway,
I think the bears have been out there for a while now, haven't they?
Oh, well, I managed to sell some off before it got too bad, so that's always good. What I'm also noting here is if you look at the article, if I link it in the stream chat here, and you'll notice that they are dressed in red with sort of geisha or geisha-esque makeup
they,
on.
And
I
not
don't.
doing the old that's theory about it. That feminist thing.
What, the peace sign, or are you?
Handmaid's Tale. Handmaid's Tale.
Oh, is
sorry.
it? Is that what it is?
Yes.
I admit that The Handmaid's Tale passed me by. I have no knowledge of it, nor did I watch it.
I don't think the outfits are directly related, but it did evoke that image the second I saw it.
I was just
It was
thinking.
like Melania Trump's Christmas trees last year.
What an odd reference that I had no idea existed. But there you
go. When she decorated the White House. Oh, Mark, let me.
I'm not up to date with White House decor, Sarah. This is what I have you for.
Well,
Why were you not keeping me up to date? What do I pay you for? I mean,
I told you to get Pinterest. Did you listen?
I'm just waiting for someone to accuse them of cultural appropriation, basically, for geisha makeup. And secondly, at first I thought that they were doing a callback to, of all things, what was that big thing? The Hunger Games years ago, where there's like that salute in that, which was adopted by the left for a brief period of time to rebel against the capital of capitalism. But nope.
They're so tedious, aren't they?
They do like latching onto pop culture symbols and then letting them go as soon as they're not trending on Twitter. I'd also like that all the photos of these protesters being arrested now look like the police have beaten them absolutely senseless because they're covered in fake blood. There's like this old man with fake blood strewn across his face and his shirt, and in any other situation it would look like a wartime protest riot vote video, but no, this is that.
You know what I think these people are? I think they are just closet reenactors because they have such a hunger for war, but without actually getting directly involved. I think that's maybe what it is.
I have no idea.
Troopers at the weekend and shed blood without having to.
Well, it's something about there's something about the middle classes as well. There's no risk to them. This is not Greta Thunberg is entertaining Michael Gove in Parliament when she deigns to, right?
She's entertaining him.
Yeah, that's the hope anyway. But so there's no this is the establishment view. I have been doing some research on climate science and the politics of climate science, which has been quite fun because it's amazing how misconstrued an awful lot of climate science is for the sake of climate alarmists like these ones, and it drives me mad because it's kind of like a lot of climate science is quite well grounded. They're not really interacting with one another, but political pundits will take different climate claims and then lump them together and make these apocalyptic doomsday predictions, which have absolutely no backing in the actual literature. It's fascinating, but yeah. Anyway, I'm just ranting now. The
No, I've already had this rant plenty of times in real life. Because they literally, I love that you hear that 97% thing, and 97% of scientists agree that, okay, but they agree that climate's changing. That's literally the only point they agree on. Everything else they disagree on.
I like that the Harry channel has put Thunberg could probably take Rory Stewart in a fight in chat.
Who couldn't take Rory Stewart in a fight?
Yeah, but who would you want to watch fight Rory Stewart? And Greta Thunberg is up there for what it is.
Only if it was one of those cage death match things.
I'd watch.
2 people enter, only 1 person leaves.
What would they be wearing? That's what I want to know. I want to know what the outfits
I'm
would
sort
be.
of thinking perhaps...
You can work that out with AA. I'll stay out of that part.
Perhaps people would like to see Austin Powers Mini-Me against Rory Stewart.
Or indeed against Greta Thunberg. I mean, Mini-Me fighting anyone could be entertaining. Architect of Fate says, the metaphor is feminists stand in the way of the market. Feminists definitely thought that one through. Clearly referring to the Defiance statue that was there.
Well, but interestingly, they stand in the way of the bull market, not in the way of the bear market.
Yes, they stand in the way of progress, not.
So basically, losses. They try to prevent the market going up, not down. Funnily enough.
And the Harry channel as well says Greta is a disabled miner. Using her as a mouthpiece for an agenda and then claiming you're punching down if you criticize her points is wrong. She should not be placed in that position. And again, like when it comes to Greta Thunberg, I see her as a victim in all of this. She's been
But I've had that too. Basically, I've mentioned Greta Thunberg and how ridiculous this all is, and immediately you get, this is you're now going at a child. Worse still, you're going at a child that's disabled.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but this person, whether it be a child or not, is being made a spokesperson for a global movement.
She's not being made a spokesperson. She's being made a sacrifice. Because I think as soon as she clicks that she has nothing of the level of which she thinks needs to be done, bringing us back to the Middle Ages, will be done. She will top herself, as far as I'm concerned. Like, I think she's going to drive herself mad. She'll be institutionalized, or she'll commit suicide. And I think that there are several people who are waiting, subconsciously or consciously, with bated breath for that to happen, so that they can use it to continue to push
beat everybody
the agenda
in the head with it.
Yeah, basically. I think it's appalling.
Look
what's been
what
done
you
to her.
did to this poor girl.
Yeah, I think it's
think
horrendous.
of the children. By the way, can I just say I'm getting to the point, and Britisher, you probably agree with me, that from now on, if I hear somebody say "think of the children," I want to drag them out in the middle of the street, beat them senseless, and then leave a sign over them says, "This is the latest idiot that said think of the children."
Yes. Yeah. No, I think we're in the same camp there. Yes.
There's an ocean between us.
The amount of demands for censorship that are based solely on, but won't anyone think of the children? You just go,
Yes.
for heaven's sake, please understand.
I literally had this argument with my wife on the way home yesterday, and what brought it up? I can't remember what brought it up, but I was talking about, well, they probably changed it because of the whole think of the children crowd. She looked at me and I said, here's the thing about the sentence "think of the children," or the statement "think of the children." The next sentence takes away some right you have. And this was like a 20-minute argument in the car.
Yeah. No, it's how should we say? The only way I can sort of rationalize the whole thing is look. The world must be a space for adults. A space for adults in which adults are treated as adults, and in which we realize that children are unfinished adults. So it's the children who are treated specially. They are made an exception of until they are adults, and then they join the rest of the world in the way the world ought to be. But the world as such must still be one for adults to be treated as grown-ups. The moment you seek to infantilize the way you treat everybody in the world, because, well, think of the children, that's when you're patronizing the entire population because you're treating everybody like kids.
And often, in a way, you a lot of the times where they say think of the children, they often infantilize the children more than they need to be.
Yes.
There is that.
Yeah. Sarah, why have you sent me a picture of a bull fornicating with a bear?
Exactly.
I looked up. I was trying to find the Bear of Wall Street.
The Bear
And
of
I
Wall
found
Street
it.
is a
And I found
person.
it.
Let me
That's what came up.
let me
I
just
imaged it.
let me just share this instant demonetization with the chat, of course.
They're having an adult hug.
And they're like two Rubik's cubes reproducing. They have a special hug.
It's Tetris.
It's just like, this is clearly a ploy by the pro bestiality crowd to show that interspecies relationships exist and should be legalized.
Yeah, is that the, how do we say, is that the illustration of what happens to the owner of a put in a bull market?
To the owner of a
put as opposed to a call. Sorry, forget I ever said it.
Yeah, I'm going. This is clearly one reference which is going past me. All right. Well, I will.
I'm staying out of that one too.
I'll continue on with the super chat. So Lumberg donated £2, says Greta equals David Icke Mark II. I mean, I don't think you can go that far, David Icke being an adult, but Greta is certainly being placed in a similar position. Mr. Gently Benevolent tags onto that and says David Icke had more charisma.
Well, I would caution against that, because David Icke, wasn't he actually a sports presenter on the BBC before he embraced his alien conspiracies and whatever?
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
He was a broadcaster and footballer, wasn't he? I think.
So he was a chap who went from being effectively embraced by the media establishment.
He was a spokesman for
a bit of a pariah.
He was a spokesman for the Green Party until a psychic told him he'd been placed on Earth for a purpose.
There you go. So he then became a bit of a sort of pariah. He kind of became a bit of a kook, so to speak, if you know what I mean. Whereas Greta Thunberg is the exact opposite. She is somebody who has been completely embraced by the media establishment.
Bye-bye. Oh, there he is.
And
run that by me one more again. I didn't hear it.
Okay. Greta Thunberg compared to David Icke, when she became famous, she was completely embraced by the media establishment, as opposed to David Icke, who was effectively shunned by the media establishment. So I think she's actually quite the opposite, because he was kind of seen as a bit of a strange cookie, whereas she is sort of seen as Joan of Arc, who is to be sort of upheld, if you know what I mean.
The super chat just means she's weird.
She's Sarah cutting to the heart of the problem. She's a weird girl. She's a weird
strange
girl.
cookie as well.
And there we go. Portrait Seal donated £5. Thank you very much. And says, hate all the messages and talk that I see of think of all the opportunities you're denying to the next generation. It's not emotional blackmail at all.
That's such a conservative thing to do. I do all the time. I'm sorry.
What to say? Think of the opportunities you're denying the next generation.
Stealing it away from the future.
Of course, you're just saying that because you're a woman, Sarah, and
True enough.
naturally,
Some maternal
childbearing being
instincts.
your birthright. It's just all these things.
Childbearing is my birthright. That's a very poetic line, Mark.
Well, you'll feel free to use it. There you go.
Childbearing.
That's right.
I'm just going to go and get a jumper quickly.
Yeah, no problem. So the stats have been updated. More than 200.
I just thought of a word play, but it's not in keeping. So please go on.
Reveal your not in keeping wordplay, Britisher.
Well, if childbearing is her birthright, is ball bearing our birthright?
I don't know. You'll have to ask a certain Italian footballer, or
Yes, of course.
Or a certain
Paolo
fan of
Maldini.
Italian footballer.
So the arrest rate has gone up to 270 in London alone for Extinction Rebellion.
Yes, but were any of them hit by police batons? That's what everybody really wants to know.
I don't think so. Although I wanted to I wanted to speak about the Gilets jaunes this week, sorry. But there is so little information about the continuing protests that it's quite difficult. I'm going to have to do some further research. Because I saw Sargon made a video on it the other day, and we were chatting about it, and it was just this horrendous. They're in their 43rd week of protests. 43rd. You can't imagine it in this country at this point, you know.
And they've been getting beat on for the better part of a year as well.
Yeah, something along the lines of what are they saying? 11 people have died, or something like that, and over 200 injured. It's quite a lot. Let me see what we got here.
Well,
I take it with a pinch of salt because I
yes,
haven't
I'm always a
verified
little
that.
suspicious when I hear about people getting injured and things like that. Because, you know, when it came to the one who was shot in Hong Kong, for example, you know, a lot was made about the fact that, he was shot at point blank range by a Chinese policeman, or I'm assuming it was a Hong Kong policeman, right in the chest.
Twice.
You know? And you sort of thought, well, yes, but he was about to beat he was about to beat the policeman with an iron bar. You know, so
yeah,
one always needs to sometimes kind of consider the wider context. So
there is also the difficulty with
some of the riotous actions in Paris.
I think
it's fair to assume that the French police aren't just gunning them down for fun, if you know what I mean.
I give the French a little bit more leeway for the protesters, mainly because Hong Kong had literal Chinese agents planted in the crowd who were there to instigate violence so that the Hong Kong police could use it as an excuse.
This is true.
Yes.
This could have even been a friendly fire incident. You'll never know.
True, but I'm not sure whether the agent would have been the guy seeking to get shot in the chest.
No, I doubt it.
There was also a clip I saw where a policeman, who was actually in plain clothes and had a gun on him, almost ended up being set on fire.
I am speaking in generalities, for sure. I'm sure your specific examples are obviously, warranted.
I mean, in the case of that policeman, he kind of got up and he was partly on fire, and his gun went scattering across the floor as he was trying to put himself out. And immediately there were some who were trying to go for the gun. And he had the wherewithal to kind of, even though he'd only just stopped burning, to actually, dive for the gun again, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So yeah, things are getting a little out of control in some quarters in Hong Kong. And I really hope that they keep that under control, because as long as it's the people coming out and it's, tens of thousands of people with umbrellas and whatever, I think they carry the moral force that is very difficult for the Chinese authorities to put down.
Yeah.
The moment they start attacking policemen with iron bars and whatever, that's where they lose it, because that's where they give the other side the excuse to use force.
Clearly it was an agent of Lammy, says the chat.
Mildly on fire.
Yeah.
Now, I heard I heard about 2 different incidents of somebody getting shot, and one of them being a kid.
I remember which set of protests are you talking about specifically?
Hong Kong.
In Hong Kong, I remember
Someone lost their eye, didn't they?
there was a young woman who lost her eye, and she
Okay.
became a martyr,
Okay.
as it were, for the cause. As in, she was suddenly, her image was everywhere.
But that was some kind of rubber bullet or something like that, wasn't
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, she'd be quite dead if it had been a real bullet.
British just sounds really disappointed.
Well, no, it's possible to get shot in the head and survive. It's just not that likely.
Desirable.
Oh,
So-
did anybody see that tweet? I mean, again, I am relying solely on a tweet going round, so forgive me if this turns out to be complete hoax. But there was a tweet doing the rounds about a US sniper having taken out an ISIS chap as he was instructing others to, how to perform beheadings.
Oh, what?
And
Wow.
apparently he, it pretty much took his head off. So kind of the ultimate irony.
Forgot
Oh, wow.
the time.
I mean, I haven't seen it because I don't have Twitter, but that is ultimate irony.
Is it a video? No, obviously not.
No, it's not a video. It's some sort of reference or whatever. But yeah, I saw that, and if that is true, then yes, that's almost a religious experience in terms of irony.
The people having the tutorial must have been so confused at that point.
So this is how you do it. The next thing they know,
Doesn't really raise a finger, but it's
oh yes.
That's quite a magic trick.
So, Sora Sapien says, the left has always attacked Mr. and Mrs. Average, Mr. and Mrs. Barnaby from Midsummer being turned into a vile parody of Mr. and Mrs. Dursley by evil leftists.
Well, Obama
I do
certainly
love
did
Barnaby.
that. Clinton certainly did that. Obama called it your average person bitter clingers holding onto their Bibles and their guns.
Bitter clingers.
That's what he said, and then of course Clinton called them all deplorables, and that worked out real well for her.
So the bitter clingers, is that sort of a reference towards Charlton Heston? Because there was that famous line by Charlton Heston, wasn't there? Out of my cold, dead hands.
Being that he ends the reference with guns, probably.
Because I mean, that's a very famous scene, isn't it? When Charlton Heston is addressing the NRA and kind of holds his rifle up in his fist.
Yeah,
and
not
ends
too
the
long
speech.
after they had made him
Yeah, and he ends the speech with "out of my cold, dead hands." And yeah, it was a memorable moment. Let's put it like that.
So it was the 2012 campaign, and it was in September. And here we go. It's they're clinging to their guns and their religion. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Keep clinging, I would say.
Keep clinging.
being that he's featuring the guns in there, so you're probably exactly right. That probably is because it was like almost immediate, because he was made the president of the NRA for what 4 or 5 years, something like that.
Something like that, I think. Yeah.
And like that was one of the first speeches that he made that got everybody all fired up. They'll pry it from my cold dead hands.
It was so memorable, and with him being an actor, I mean, that's why they tend to get celebrities, if you know what I mean, because actors know how to deliver lines like that, and it's a kind of iconic moment, isn't it? It's one of those things you see it and you don't really forget it in a hurry.
Right, I have the last story of the evening. This one's a little bit different. This is about BBC Radio 4, and it's about a Sikh peer. So Lord Singh of Wimbledon is quitting Thought for the Day after 35 years in a protest at the BBC, saying that some of his talks might offend Muslims. Inderjeet Singh, as he'd been known to listeners, has accused the corporation of prejudice and intolerance after it tried to prevent him from broadcasting an item commemorating an executed Sikh guru who had opposed the forced conversion of Hindus to Islam under the Mughal emperors of India in the 17th century. And the BBC tried to stop the script being broadcast last November because it might offend Muslims, even though it contained no criticism of Islam. It was like saying to a Christian that he or she should not talk about Easter for fear of giving offence to the Jews, he said. After he threatened to leave the slot empty rather than have his religious teachings insulted in this way, the corporation allowed him to go ahead, and he was not told of any listeners having been offended. He then made a complaint, and a review rejected his complaint, and then he left the BBC this month. And he is a long-standing interfaith activist, saying that some contributors to the slot joked amongst themselves about being subject to the thought police. So there we go.
Well, it's the compliance department. That is the thought police. There is literally a compliance department in the BBC, and they vet everything. If you actually have a scripted joke that you intend to use in any program in the BBC, so you know in advance that you're going to make it, then you must submit it to the compliance department.
Mm.
I'm not kidding.
No, I'm sure.
I mean, just try and imagine for a moment what sort of a regime that kind of implies, if you know what I mean.
The compliance department is the reason Lindy Beige doesn't have a show on BBC.
Yes. Yeah, precisely. You sort of look at these things and you think, well, how Orwellian can you actually make it sound? The compliance department, and yeah, they're completely unironic in that regard. They have, I don't know, John Cleese, I think, eventually only worked for them because he was pretty much broke because his divorces were too expensive. But for years, he had refused to work with them precisely because of that attitude.
Hmm. There you go. Any thoughts from across the pond?
I just got interrupted, so sorry, no.
All right. And anything from Sarah?
It makes me seek, is what I was going to say.
It makes you seek. Bruv.
Is there such a thing as an academic compliance department these days?
No.
There are about 30 of them. British.
Yes. They're called
Yes.
pay-to-publish journals online.
From speed dial. Oh, meow.
I definitely don't have an issue within my own discipline about pay-to-publish journals. It's just and the people who quote from them. But,
I need to
Yes,
talk
but,
Mark later.
you know, I really struggle to understand how we could possibly have ended up in the place we have done. Where there literally is a compliance department, and nobody sees a problem with that.
It's just an official spin doctor. I mean, really. That's
There's
all
truth
it
to that.
is. I mean, I don't blame a company for having effectively what is a PR compliance department.
But
I do.
But we all know that this is not PR. It's actual content review. This is the equivalent of having a. Surely you've seen Red October, Hunt for Red October with Sean Connery as the
Sure.
Soviet.
Yes.
You know the guy who, in inverted commas, slips on his tea. The one guy he knows he
The
has to
political
get rid
officer.
of at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the political officer. Now tell me that the people in the compliance department are not actually the political officers in the BBC.
Yes, they are. That's why I said I have a problem with compliance departments. I mean, not that we talk about it very often, but I got more or less canceled myself by a political officer type in the company I was working at. So
Very, very Ministry of Truth.
Yes, and this is what I mean. This is not PR. This is not just basically making sure that that we smooth the waves. This is actual policing of content. Hence, you can't talk about this Sikh martyr or whatever he was, because no, we don't want to. We won't allow that sort of content. That's exactly the sort of thing that the political officer would say.
Yes, I see
And
more about what you're saying now. Yes.
and you look at it, and it just, I don't know, everything inside of me just one more than likely notices that I get a little more passionate when I start talking about this kind of thing, because it really riles me.
Yes.
Yes.
Indeed.
I saw a couple of different clips with that Rod Little guy talk, and he was talking about that out of everybody he'd ever met in the BBC, literally only one person voted leave. That's a very right thinky thing there.
Hmm. Yes. Well, because over decades now they have only really hired their own. And
The BBC an echo chamber, Britisher?
well, I
Surely
mean,
not.
put it like this: I think the darkest period that since then has, in a way, passed was, I believe, that of Mr. Alan Yentop, who kind of became a bit of a celebrity of his own. Not only because he had his own program, because if you're a bigwig in the BBC, that's not that difficult to accomplish, if you know what I mean. But he was one of the sort of bureaucratic BBC animals, and I believe he was at the BBC for something like 20, 30 years, if you know what I mean. So he really kind of part of the wallpaper, and as such, he managed to get himself, promoted and promoted, and in the end, he was in charge of all, what was it called, creative output,
Okay.
and he was in charge of that for something like 10 years. And in that entire time, you wondered, okay, what new programs are there? Um, um, and you said, well, what does the man do all day? Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
And eventually, when he left, that was actually due to a scandal, because he got a little bit too big for his shoes, because he was on the board of a charity that got into trouble, and when the BBC wanted to cover it, he had a shouting match trying to use his authority within the BBC, and he had a shouting match in the lobby of the BBC with a member of the news crew about what they ought or ought not be reporting about his charity, if you know what I mean. And eventually that proved too much. So being completely incompetent and being one of the key figures that ran the BBC into the ground, that wasn't enough. But the moment he started intervening in news coverage because he was on the board of a particular charity that was in trouble, that's when one thought, okay, enough's enough. But I think he left with something like a pension of something like £600,000 a year or something like that. It just, it's obscene what some of these people get. And as I
Good
say,
grief.
this is somebody, you sort of wonder, what actually did the man do for the entire period in which he was in charge? And my guess is he will have been one of the sifters, as in, who do we hire and who do we let go? And
Sounds.
therefore, how do
So you're
we...
thinking diversity officer before there was a such thing.
Yeah, sort of
Right,
basically, how do I steer from the top to make sure that everyone eventually thinks the same as I do, rather than actually what programs am I going to make?
600,000 a year pension, though. Sounds like I
It
need
was
to eye up
something like
this.
that. I might be misremembering, but it was something vast.
I need to eye up that job. Clearly,
Well,
I need to ascend to the top of the pyramid.
Good luck with that. As Laconic
Or
points out
it'll-
in chat,
or-
any institution with a diversity officer is discriminatory by nature.
all it'll cost me is all of my morals. That sort of thing. Right.
And your father's pride.
And my father's pride. On that note, I think it is time to end with a riled Britisher. But thank you very much to all my guests for joining
Just
me.
as we started.
Yes, indeed. A very big thank you to all of my guests, including the very cheeky Sarah. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Our guest from across the pond, Staff Sergeant Sniper. Thank you very much.
It was wonderful as always.
And of course to the Britisher.
Yes, the riled Britisher who ended up riled and began riled even though nobody heard the thing.
Indeed.
Nobody wanted
nobody
to tell
heard
you,
the
my
first
darling. They wanted to tell you.
Don't worry. Next week it'll be there, and we'll see you all then. Next Monday for the next Fake Accents Unite. Good night, all, and have a great week.
Toodle pip.